Okay, today we're going to talk about acids and bases, and to help us, we have a Professor Simona is going to help us talk about acids and bases. Okay, so first question to you, Professor, is what is an acid and what is a base?
An acid is a chemical that releases hydrogen ions. A base releases hydroxide ions.
Okay, so to recap, an acid, like in this picture over here, you can see an acid is a chemical that will break up and release these things, these protons, hydrogen ions. And so here's an acid. And then the base, we can see, is something that releases hydroxide ions, which are these things. Okay, Professor, so next question will be, what are some examples of acids and bases?
For an acid, hydrochloric acid will break up in water to make hydrogen ions, while sodium hydroxide will release hydroxide ions.
Okay, very good, excellent. So we can see here how these two will break up, and you can see hydrochloric acid will break up to release protons or hydrogen ions, while sodium hydroxide will break up in water to release hydroxide ions. Perfect. Okay, the next question then, Professor, is what are some common sources of acids and bases?
For acids, we can find them in things like lemons, batteries, and vinegar. For bases, we can find them in household cleaners and baking soda.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, next question, Professor. How do you name acids?
Which ones, binary or oxyacids?
Let's start with binary acids first.
Okay, binary acids contain hydrogen and one element, and they always start with hydro.
Okay, so for instance, hydrochloric acid would be HCl. That would be one example. Another example would be hydrofluoric acid, which would be basically hydrogen and fluorine. And another example would be hydrosulfuric acid, which would be hydrogen and sulfur. And a fourth example actually would be hydronitric, which would be basically hydrogen with nitrogen.
Yes, well, oxyacids don't start with hydro.
Okay, so oxyacids don't start with hydro. So some examples would be, I guess, sulfuric acid, which would be H2SO4. So that would be sulfuric acid. And you can see this is a combination of basically hydrogen with sulfate. So that would be one example. Another example would be carbonic acid, which would be this. So that would be carbonic acid. And that would be a combination of hydrogen with carbonate. There you go. And then a third example would be phosphoric acid, which is a combination of, as we can see here, hydrogen and phosphate. So here's phosphoric acid, and we can see it's a combination of hydrogen with phosphate.
Yes, that's right. Oxyacids are hydrogen and negative polyatomics.
Okay, so what about bases?
They're easy. They end with hydroxide.
Okay, so bases are easy. They end with hydroxide, and they're combinations of metals with hydroxide ions. So, for example, this would be potassium hydroxide. So you can see that it's basically potassium with hydroxide ions, so it's potassium hydroxide. This would be then calcium hydroxide. Okay, and this then would be lithium hydroxide. Okay, so here's a question. Sodium carbonate doesn't end with hydroxide. It's a base, so what gives?
Some chemicals become bases in water. For example, sodium carbonate in water will release hydroxide ions.
And here is the equation for that. So sodium carbonate in water will become the following. Sodium ions, bicarbonate ions, and hydroxide ions. And another example of something that does not have hydroxide in it is ammonia. So ammonia in water will become ammonium ions and hydroxide ions. Okay, thanks for watching our video on acids and bases.